we're going to see some shock waves in the gold market where it could even be this summer or this autumn. Don't know what kind of criminal reaction you're going to get, but we might see a $200 to $300 gold move in a single day. Not just set new highs over 1900 in the dollar market for gold, but just across the board, enormous moves up because things are starting to break.
Hey friends, before we begin this interview with Jim Willie, just a quick word from this interview's sponsor. The spreading fear about the coronavirus is starting to make us realize how quickly things can change, but you can be prepared for the worst, even if the lights go out. Get one of the best solar banks on the market, the Backup Solar Bank. The good news is you'll never waste money on batteries again because the Backup Power Bank is solar powered. With dual USB ports, you can charge up to 2 devices at once, and you can charge your phone anywhere. This device is an all-in-one lifesaver, and I don't go anywhere without mine. Device features include solar-powered recharging, dual USB ports, 8,000 mAh battery capacity, LED lamp illumination, USB cable, and detachable compass. The Backup Solar Bank is the perfect device to assist you and your family when the lights go out. But limited supplies last, and it's your last chance to get yours at a discount before they sell out. Take advantage now and give you and your family the gift of power anywhere in the world. So visit backupsolarbank.com and use promo code SGT15 to save 15% off your order. I'll leave the link below this interview. And welcome back. Friends, thank you so much for clicking play. It's great that you're here. I really love it. It's wonderful to have back on the line Jim Willie, too. He is the proprietor of golden-jackass.com, and we have so much to talk about today, not the least of which is an economic situation that is so precarious, I cannot overstate it. Now, on Friday, guys, we saw the stock market absolutely tank and then magically shoot straight right back up, and gold really took a plunge. It's just more manipulation. We're going to talk about the end game. My guest, Jim Willie, joins us right now. How are you, Jim?
I'm hanging in there. These are exciting times. There's no denial. And you know what's happening? It's kind of strange, but the conspiracy theorists and those who have been advocating gold and who have been talking about the weaknesses of the dollar, we're all being vindicated now. And that's, I think, a very big step. It's a step toward national awareness, Western awareness. I like the vindication because I've had so many people tell me in the past, you're crazy and your views are very extreme. And I said, we're in an extreme situation. Since when do you not call it extreme that you've had 7 or 8 years of hypermonetary inflation with the Fed buying our debt and derivative machinery covering our debt with the absence of bondholders? Since when is that not extreme? 7 years and we're still stuck in a shit economy.
Jim, I got to play a soundbite for you. This is a perfect segue. It backs up exactly what you're talking about. This is Mark Faber, who appeared on Silver Bullion TV. That's a YouTube channel. And Mark Faber was talking about the fact that in 2008 and 9, when they began QE, he realized this was a program that would never end. Listen to this.
Once you embark on printing money, you can, and this has been described very clearly by Hayek and von Mises, once you start printing money and you finance the economy with credit, the only way to keep it going is to continuously increase the quantity of money you essentially print. The moment you just print money constantly, you already have a crisis. So it has to be at an accelerating rate.
I'll pause it there. Now, one thing I want to say, you mentioned gold. You feel vindicated that gold is doing well. It should do well. It should be doing far better than it even is. But I do want to make the point that these bastards continue to make so many of us feel stupid for having bought silver, because silver should be far, far higher. So isn't it funny? They print money, they produce negative yielding bonds, and silver gets punished. It's an upside down world, Jim.
It is. I have recently been repeating something that's really quite amazing. If you take a 2013 gold price, I don't think it actually traded at that point of say $12.50. Just imagine 2012, 13, you're trading at 1250. I don't think it was really 1250 for a couple of years, but this exaggerates the point. And then you impose actual price inflation of like 8%. It's, you know, you go to shadow government statistics and you get some accurate readings. You get it confirmed with the Chapwood CPI and other practical baskets and their calculations. But if you impose an 8% rule per year and move it up to 2019, 2020, you're at 1900. So 1900 is the same as 1250 8 years ago, 7 years ago. We haven't gone anywhere. We're still behind the block. And when people say, you know, you're going to get a proper value, a true value of about 1900, I say, bullshit. You're going to get a proper value of about 5,000, of about 3,000. Okay, I'm expecting some events coming up. I don't know how soon, Sean. It's very difficult because we don't know whether they're going to throw another $3 billion worth of paper gold shorts at the market in a single week. We don't know if they're going to do that again and again. But I'm coming to the opinion that we're going to have, I don't know about a closed gold market, but we're going to see some shock waves in the gold market where it could even be this summer or this autumn. Don't know what kind of criminal reaction you're going to get, but we might see a $200 to $300 gold move in a single day. Not just set new highs over 1900 in the dollar market for gold, but just across the board, enormous moves up because things are starting to break. I kind of enjoy seeing the bond market doing what it's doing, and that's, you know, having a big rally. Money is going from stocks to bonds. That's clearly what's going on. And I think it's being furthered by the derivative machinery. But I was expecting that we might get below 1.0 in the next few months. And we did it in a matter of days, and now we're suddenly down to 70 basis points. I think there's an actual avalanche going on where movement out funds out of the stock market into the bond market is happening in a very big way. What Faber was mentioning was the Ponzi corollary, that once you begin a Ponzi scheme, you've got to accelerate in order to stay the same. That sounds a little bit contradictory, but you need to accelerate the monetary impetus, the printing process, the infusion into the markets, the covering of debt. You need to accelerate in order to stay the same for your economy, in order to stay the same for your stock market. So the Fed is going to be in a very difficult bind, and I'm pretty convinced right now that the Fed is no longer independent. I think the Rothschild cabal has stepped back. That's a story in itself, a very big story. I think a lot of their middle-level players have been wiped out, have been, we call it stripped, flipped, or killed. We can get to that in another moment. But I don't see any evidence from the last year, 2 years, 3 years of acceleration. Instead, we saw a rather calamitous attempt to do quantitative tightening. And when they started the tightening, I was in doubt. I thought, this was about 2016. I thought, and I was public about it, this won't continue. It's suicidal. And then they raised rates again. And I thought, a move to normalcy? We're way past that, because I'm on record in 2008 as saying we're going to 0% and we'll never go away from it. We'll never rise. And you know, obviously the echo of that is if they bother to try to rise, they're going to create a disaster. And then in 2011, I said, we're going to go to QE and we're never going to get off it. We're going to have trillion-dollar deficits for as far as the eye can see. And we have that. And we're stuck at zero. We went back to zero with a vengeance. And now we've got the Fed, they're behind the curve. They wanted to slow it down and slow it down. And I think they wanted to cause problems. I'm not really sure. I think they wanted to cause problems so that the march into bonds would be uninhibited. Now, that's a very weird thought, but so be it. The quantitative tightening for over 2 years was a disaster. The claim of move to normalcy was moronic. And the outcome was just one accident after another. These banks, these are shells. The big banks are shells. They're doing nothing more than swap trades and indirect support of the Fed, the federal debt. If you remove hedge funds, I think we would have had a U.S. government debt default. It's as simple as that. The swap trade is indirectly permitting the hedge funds to do a short on the interest rate swap and a long on the Treasury bond. And the U.S. government loves it. The Department of Treasury loves it. And that's why they ordered the Fed to support the hedge funds as extensions to banks. And I like to point out that the hedge funds are a majority subsidiary entities operating under the Wall Street bank roofs. There's a lot going on, and this is very exciting. And, I got a totally contrary view of what's going on with the coronavirus, and I'd like to share it, but only when you're ready to get to the virus, because
I am. I was going to go there next because I wanted to ask you how this game of musical chairs continues when China is shut down. The factories are largely shut down. It's a big part of our global economy, and we in America rely on China for most of the stuff we see in a Walmart or a Target or an Apple store. So this thing is going to have a very real world effect on our economy. And I know that the powers that be in this country aren't really saying that yet. They're scared to death that this thing is going to bring our economy to its knees. And do you think it's going to get as bad here as we're seeing in Wuhan? I pray to God it doesn't, but if it does, all bets are off.
Wow, Wuhan is a very jumbled story. I got to do a preface here.
And I do too. I'm sorry. I want to share one piece of good news. This is very important. And it's not good news if you're Asian. I'm sorry. I don't mean to say it's good news, but if you're an African person, African-American person, or a Caucasian person, this virus evidently will not affect you as badly. Your risks are lower. Chinese scientists find genetic explanation for coronavirus discriminating by race. And basically this thing goes on to explain that because of a single-cell RNA expression, I'm reading this from Zero Hedge, because of a single-cell RNA expression profiling of ACE2, the putative receptor of Wuhan 2019, because Asian people are more apt to be attacked because of the way, I don't even know how to say this, Jim, but genetically speaking, Asian people are 5 times more likely to succumb to this thing because of their lungs. In this article, it says, we also noticed that the only Asian donor, male, has a much higher ACE2 expressing cell ratio than white and African-American donors, 2.5% versus 0.47% of all cells. He's talking about the cells in the lungs. So Asian people are 5 times, by my math, 5 times more likely to be adversely or seriously affected by COVID-19. And I don't know if you know this, but I was recently attacked by the Wall Street Journal for merely asking the question, did this thing come from a bioweapons lab, a level 4 bioweapons lab, or was it miraculously born in a wet market like they want us to believe? And I was attacked for asking that question. This science, this research coming out, is just further proof, in my view, that this thing is bioweaponized. So I'll shut up now, but that's the good news because I don't want people to panic. Evidently, if you're not Asian, you're not going to be at as much risk.
I'm hearing pretty much the same thing. The ratios I hear are not exactly equal, but they're in the same intervals. I asked a different kind of question. Are there any urban communities or mid-sized cities that don't have Chinese neighborhoods or Chinese nuclei? I don't like that word. Centers of population. Like Los Angeles has got Chinatown. San Francisco, giant Chinatown. We've got a little Chinatown here in San Jose, Costa Rica. It's only got several hundred people, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000, but they're scattered around. I know in a mall that I frequent, there are 2 or 3 shops that are run by Taiwanese, And, it's pretty hard to distinguish Chinese from Taiwanese. They sound the same. They look the same. I'm not racist. I got Chinese friends. I had a Chinese friend in graduate school, Gabriel. He was a good guy. We used to get crazy once in a while. He was a nice fellow. You opened up an enormous can of worms here, and it's pretty hard to respond. So I'm going to try item by item from my own familiarity, but I need a disclaimer first. I do have a little bit of a scientific background. I don't have engineering degrees. I don't have physics degrees. I've got a statistics and it's mathematical. Gosh, I got a very weird comment a couple weeks ago. Jim, I heard you have a PhD in statistics, but doesn't that just mean you know how to add things and take standard deviations well? No, it's kind of equal to a math PhD, but with an application into probability, which is an enormous field when you count stochastic processes and linear models and all kinds of different, semi-definite matrix inversion and eigenvalue. Oh gosh, okay, I didn't erupt on him, but I said, no, you're mistaken. It's a branch of mathematics that was kind of an offshoot to the math departments, and it's kind of the same level of discipline, but it's very distinct in probability, and the whole science of testing is called statistics. And behind every statistic, like the average or the standard deviation or things like that, correlation, there's mathematics behind it to explain its distribution. Okay, my point is that I've got a strong math background, but I also had a computer science background, and I took a lot of courses in science, and I decided that when I began my work career in 1980, I was going to read and read and read. So I read about nutrition, I read about vitamins, supplements, enzymes, cancer, treatment, radiation, microwaves. I read about a lot of things. It's kind of funny because I did a lot of the reading when I was on ski trips to Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. I would take along with me some Scientific American magazines, and I'd read 20 pages about enzymes and cancer prevention. And I wonder why the American medical community doesn't advocate eating a hell of a lot of cauliflower and broccoli. So since they don't, I began to conclude in the 1980s that the medical association and the pharmaceutical associations were all in bed together, and we're not out for our best health. Okay, sorry for yelling, but I get very worked up about this stuff. Okay, I took a bunch of different courses. I did a lot of different reading, and I'm familiar with a lot of concepts. I did take genetics. I thought, well, gosh, I took biology. I think I'm going to take genetics and learn about RNA, DNA, and complementary RNA, and mapping and all this stuff. Wow, it was a lot of fun. It was not easy, but it was a lot of fun. And I didn't ace it. I didn't ace it like I did math and stats. No,
but
no.
I bet given your background, you're not surprised by what I just read, because the question is, really, is this thing a bioweapon or not? The Wall Street Journal says, don't you dare ask that question, SGT Report. Don't you dare.
Well, my response to that is, how can you defend that this is natural when the evidence is overwhelming? And then you got the reports from Langley doctors who boast that this is a near perfect design to attack the yellow man. Okay, I'm going to use colors as race: black, yellow, brown. I'm not a racist at all. I have got Jewish friends. I've got black friends. I got a black friend in Colombia. He's a great guy from Texas and Arkansas. Great guy, smart as hell.
But it seems if this thing is a bioweapon, whether it was released on purpose or not, that's a big part of it, because if it was released on purpose, this is war. All right, somebody's trying to wage war with China.
Okay. Let me back up a little bit. I've got my own sources, and I've got some smart colleagues, and we piece things together, and we try to appeal to a couple different particular people because they have better sources. And what I'm hearing is that in November and December, China let it be known that they weren't going to accept the dollar anymore for trade. What? I think that should have been global headlines. And the next thing we know, that there's a virus that's on the loose. Now, I'm going to be careful with my verbs, okay? there's a virus that's on the loose, and there's stories about Winnipeg, Canada, and laboratories and escaped test, what do you call it? Escaped virus nodule. I don't know what the word is. Ampules, you know, help me out here. Test kits, or not test kits, but lab containers. I don't know what they're called.
Vials. Yeah.
Vials. Okay. Then 2 or 3 weeks later, we heard stories about University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, with a big contract to develop some things. And then we have the trail heading back to British biolabs. And my gosh, my head's spinning with the thought that, my gosh, the evidence is just piling up, and I'm trying to be impartial. The evidence is piling up that this is kind of targeted. And then we hear the US story. We don't want the Chinese shipments in the supply chain because they might contain the virus in, you know, damp sections of the containers or whatever in the products, the packaging of the products. And then we hear that the Chinese are not showing up for work, so they couldn't ship anyway. And I'm thinking, golly, if you're looking for a false story in reaction to the Chinese finally refusing the treasury bond and the dollar as payment, then this is nearly perfect.
Yeah, let me just read this from globalresearch.ca. It's a website I like very much, founded by Dr. Chosadesky. Who made coronavirus? Was it the US, Israel, or China? Now, this article here, the subheadline says, it might be possible that Washington, boy, I don't even like to read this, Jim, because this is the type of stuff that brings me a lot of heat via being on YouTube and them trying to kill my channel and being attacked by the Wall Street Journal. But look, if you're going to actually if we're going to do investigative journalism, this question needs to be asked. He says, it might be possible that Washington has created and unleashed the virus in a bid to bring Beijing's growing economy and military might down a few notches. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but that is one thesis. But the mainstream media wants us to believe this all happened accidentally, and it's really devastating China, and now it's going global. But I don't think it's going to get as bad in this country as it is in China, based on what I previously read about the way this thing was concocted to target Asian people, people of Asian descent. And I guess that's, boy, it's not good news. I hate to keep using that frame. It's good news. It's not good news, but it's good news if it doesn't get as bad here as it is in Wuhan and around China.
I have a hard time with any argument that this was accidental. I have a hard time with that. Okay, this is my method of thinking. I try to be really impartial. I try to be not indifferent because I'm angry as hell. I like to put up, okay, there's an opinion. Let's put it on the wall. Okay, and you got plus, you got minus, you got pro, you got con. Okay, on the wall is the argument that this was accidental, a leak from the Canadian lab, and maybe it was allowed, I don't know, but it was a leak. And how can we support that? Well, I got 2 or 3 stories that support that. I'm not too sure about the sources. I got about 80 on the other side saying it's not the case, or maybe it's 70 or 68. The weight is incredibly imbalanced for supporting evidence, supporting data, supporting arguments. And I just look for the convenience of it all. What has China been doing the last 2 or 3 years? Belt and Road. What happened with the full year 2019? Well, it was $1.35 trillion of paid, completed trade. And I was saying back in 2017 and 18, let's see if this Belt and Road can get some traction and develop some critical mass. Well, I don't know about you, but 1.3 trillion is critical mass. And I don't know about you, but there's a trend that was identified by Hugo Salinas Price that many central banks, not just the major, many different central banks were unloading their treasury bonds in favor of gold, and doing so in a secretive manner, hiring closely affiliated financial firms and using a double accounting book. In other words, they're lying all the way through the process of dumping the dollar and going with gold at the central bank level. Okay, so China has been building up to become a serious threat to the king dollar court, I call it, or the king dollar world. or the king dollar sphere. And I was promoting the argument that we're soon going to see, and I think we've already begun that with this critical mass. So I call it the Eurasian trade zone. The Belt and Road is merely the project management side of the Eurasian trade zone. It's often called the Eurasian Economic Union, but I don't want a triple E, triple U after a double E, double U, and after a single E, single U. I'm tired of it all. Call it the Eurasian Trade Zone, ETZ. So with all of this, I was expecting a dual universe where the Asians would operate with the RMB, the ruble, and gold, and the West with the North America and, you know, whatever they could bring in tow among the Latin American nations, in addition to Western Europe and England, they would remain in the dollar sphere. And then you'd have the frontier zone, as I call it. The frontier zone is where the battleground is. And that's Iran, Saudi Arabia, Germany, and then you saw the Instex come into being, where the Germans would pay for Iranian oil using the Instex payment system instead of SWIFT. So the battleground is really with the Saudis and the Germans, and in the German shadow is the French. In the German shadow is also the British, which brings a lot of weight to the German initiative against the dollar. What the Germans are trying to do is saying, we're not against the dollar, we just want to expand and not be so concentrated and be diversified in our trade using the Russian ruble. And with the Russians, we can use the euro for trade payment. And with oil, we can use the euro and the Instex with Iran. And then the Russians are coming in to take more control of not just Venezuela oil, but the Saudi oil. And they're buying Saudi oil. And you got to ask the question, why do the Russians buy oil? It's to help out liquidity and to convert those nations who are oil producers into non-dollar members in trade. And the Russians are doing that with Venezuela. They're doing that with Saudi Arabia. They're doing that with other nations. I can't think of the other, there's a third nation in there, I can't think of it. But this is how the Russians are pulling nations away from the dollar sphere. And it's very effective. I got to tell you something though, this is, you know, it's also dangerous ground, but I try to be brief and move on. Got stories about that. It's an effective method, be brief and move on. Langley, you know, the Central Intelligence Agency, Langley, Virginia. I refer to them as Langley. It's just easier to say. In Spanish, they call it the CIA. No, not CIA, La CIA. And you say La CIA, they know what you're talking about here. They know what you're talking about all through Latin America. But Langley has a lot of different businesses. And I don't like to get into all the details, but it's not just narcotics. It's a lot of different things. Weapons, you know, trafficking of human trafficking of all kinds, United Nations helping them out, offering cover, both personnel and structures, you know, like buildings, routes. But Langley has a lot of dollar-based businesses. So they're going to be dead last in migrating away from the dollar. So if you're looking for an argument that the dollar will continue, look no further than Langley, which has trillion-dollar assets at stake. And okay, are they going to convert? And if they do, to what? I don't really know. Maybe you know, mining properties, but there are not several $1 trillion worth of mining properties to invest in. So what would the 7 silos of the Langley dollar businesses invest in? I'm thinking they're going to invest in gold mines, gold bullion, and refineries, and try to control the market like they do everything else with vertical integration. Okay, I'm glad you mentioned Chasudovsky, because I had some direct contact with him way back in, I think it was around 2003, 2002 and 2003. And it was about the entire 9/11 nonsense, the official story. And it was, I think it was about a historical point that the Arabs in World War II, the Arabs had some Nazi divisions in the military. And Chossudovsky had an article about that. And we didn't have extensive email communication. It was one or two, and that was it. I made a point, and he confirmed it. I made another point. He said, no, that doesn't make any sense, and kind of let it go. I learned later how influential and how historically important the man is. The man is, you know, on the ladder of 1 to 10, the man is up by 9 or 9.5 in stature.
Yeah, I bought his book, America's War on Terrorism, which really breaks down the whole fable of what happened post 9/11. So, yeah, he was definitely above the target, you know, throughout his career. And globalresearch.ca is a very, very important site. So, I just interrupt to share that with you, and also just to say, let's keep an eye on the clock. It's 1:15 here Central Time, and I've got about another 30 minutes. So, we're going to just have to try to keep our eyes over the target here. Somehow bring it back to China, I guess, and bring it back to the economy for me, because I'm really concerned about this fragile global economy.
Okay, we haven't touched on 5G. About 2 weeks after hearing the first reports of the virus outbreak, I heard that Wuhan was a major center for the rollout of 5G. So my antenna went up. Okay, there's something called confounding in statistics. Let me give you an example. Suppose you run a promotion. You're doing a retail sales analysis, like I used to do at Staples. You're doing a promotion, and you're doing it in 7 cities. And it just turned out that that weekend for the promotion, in the 7 cities, 5 of them had rainstorms. Okay, so when you're doing the analysis, you're kind of stuck that your effect from your promotion is mixed in with your effect of your rainstorm. Now you might say, well, but you got 2 other cities. That's not enough. It's not enough, not significant. You need like 30 cities, and 17 or 14 or 12 had rain and a lot did not, so that you could look at the rain factor and your promotion factor and not have them mixed together. When they're mixed together in statistics, you call it confounding. And you cannot separate the two unless you have a controlled experiment to be careful not to mix the two in a significant manner. It's an unresolvable problem. So I started hearing about 5G in Wuhan, and my first question was, other cities also? Because I'm worried about the confounding. Other cities, and I heard, well, there's some others, but Wuhan was the pilot city. And I thought, wow, that's important. Next question, how many towers were installed in Wuhan? We're talking about 5 or 10, or are we talking about 5 or 10,000? Or are we talking about 5 or 10,000? Pardon my term, 5 or 900. And I heard 10,000 towers. That's a big number. And it's in multiple cities in China. And then I just happened to hear that there was a very big military conference in Wuhan before the outbreak. And then I heard that Angela Merkel, whose middle name I think is Hitler, I'm not sure, Angela Merkel was in Wuhan before the outbreak. And I'm thinking, this whole thing is starting to stink, not just with 5G confounding, but with the whole story about, the Chinese stole it from Canada and Winnipeg, and oh my gosh, yeah, well, was it Winnipeg or was it North Carolina? I go back to memories of Clinton and Sandia Labs in 1994 or so, an enormous controversy where apparently Clinton opened the door. Okay, let's be nice about it. He opened the door accidentally and the Chinese stole a bunch of weapons schematics. Or let's not be so kind. The Clinton Foundation was paid off to sell schematics, okay? Those are 2 interpretations. I don't know where the truth is. I tend to lean on Clinton being corrupt because if you put the Clinton paste on the board and look at the pro and the negative, the pro has about 5 or 6, the negative has about 500. So I don't ever give the Clintons a break, especially when I saw Bill Clinton in a blue dress the other day with shaved
Epstein's
legs.
apartment, yeah. A painting
Yeah,
of Bill Clinton in a
yeah.
blue dress in
Yeah.
Epstein's New York apartment. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there was a stain on that dress, though, Sean. I'm not
These people
sure.
are so sick, Jim. No, they're so sick, and now they want to shove Joe Biden down our throats. I mean, give me a break. Biden,
I
did
laugh. Okay, let me finish off with the Wuhan. I don't have too much more to say. Okay, so I began to do some research, and in my March report is going to be a little bit more on this story, because I asked one of my clients, who's a very solid medical professional, who I've been in touch with on other matters, and we just got to know each other. I said, hey, can you help me out here? Can you pass this around? And the question was, how similar is radiation burn on the lung tissue compared to the damage from the fibrosis and all the other effects from the virus? Is the damage from radiation similar to the damage from virus? And how would you compare, say, pneumonia and its damage to the lungs to the virus and its damage to the lungs? And I've gotten some results back from one of his expert buddies. He said, Jim, I've known this guy for decades. He's a very smart guy. Here's what he had to say. And, you know, I don't want to give it all away, but let me just say that it's kind of all mixed together. Mm-hmm. There are other reports that raised my radar or antenna. There were people reported in China that just died without any viral symptoms. They fell dead.
Right.
And I'm thinking, okay, so it's not virus. What else could it be? And then I remembered, well, the cows and the birds in Western Europe, they fell dead too from 5G. So, okay, the confounding of 5G with the coronavirus, it just looks a little bit too tight. And it deserves, let me just say that the practical conclusion, it deserves much further investigation. And I'm very happy to see that it is getting much more further investigation. I like to see those additional steps taken by intrepid analysts. You know, there's guys like John Rappaport who say, you know, guys, let's blame everything on the virus. Let's don't test anything. If it's pneumonia, that does okay. Well, let's just call it the virus. If it's this or that, let's just call it the virus. If there's a supply chain problem, let's blame it on the virus. Okay, maybe the Chinese rejected the dollar, and in some strange sequence of events, they got the virus. And some very strange sequence of mutations, it seems to attack the yellow man more. Oh my gosh! You know, I gotta raise one point. We haven't touched on this at all, but I invite the intrepid analysts out there, and I just don't have all the data. But I've noticed that a few years ago, Zero Hedge had a story on Iranian ships shipping a dispatch. What do you call it? Selling oil and delivering oil, and it was transponder type data. And there was other data that was reported that Zero Hedge did that showed that Venezuela, despite all the sanctions and the obstructions, that the transponder data was showing that Venezuela was successfully shipping and delivering oil. Well, here's a challenge. This is my suspicion. Nations that don't require the dollar as payment continue to see shipments. Nations that depend upon the dollar are seeing an interruption. Now, China is not completely shut down. They're still shipping product. They're not shipping anywhere near as much. That's an understood statement. I'm wondering if there are various Chinese trade partners who continue to receive shipments, and at the same time, correlated with that, is that the payments are not in the dollar. Okay, so we need an analysis of the correlation of shipments, whether they're made or not, and whether they're dollar or not. And I suspect the non-dollar shipments are continuing, but with some interruptions, not crippled interruptions. Okay, the other thing I want to check, and we're going to see it real soon because I've already started to see some maps. I want to see the corona maps in red with intensity of red for greater concentration of reported cases. And superimposed on that, I want to see another map of 5G installations. I think they're going to overlap. But, you know, that's just my preconceived notion based on maybe not so much preconceived, post-conceived data and anecdotal evidence. Okay, I like to remain neutral on really important things until I start to see a pileup of the data on one side as opposed to the other. I mean, you got to be fair. You got to be fair. If you were fair about, say, the gold market theory of suppressed prices, okay, you put up on the board that it's a fair market, and then you hear about how Volcker tried to eliminate all purchase orders. Okay, let's put that on the negative side. After 25 years, you've got about, I don't know, 15 or 20 things in support of the argument that there's no suppression. And you got about 5,000 that support the argument that it's a suppressed market. Okay, that's what I like to do. You know, let the darts show up, and let's just see where the predominance is. And for me, we're starting to see a predominance that 5G is happening as a confounding factor with the cases. And I don't have evidence yet, but I suspect that we're going to start to see more evidence. And I'm easily swayed to the opposite point of view.
No, I think you're right. Look, 5G, we know that 5G can be weaponized, and we know that 5G can inhibit your body's ability to uptake oxygen. I'm not going to get into the cellular science on this thing. Others have done that. But 5G is a continuing concern, and you're right. Wuhan was a pilot city for 5G. The towers are everywhere. So your point's a good one. You take a bioweapon and you add to it 5G, and you could probably very specifically take out the dissidents you want to take out. So let's not forget that either. If you're one of the rulers of China and you want to take out some dissidents, now you've got the ability to do that. Okay, before we run out of time here, can you just give me your views on the U.S. stock market and the U.S. economy? The stock market has really taken a hit, and I'm kind of glad to see it because the stock market has been run up for years with funny money and Fed front running. So it's time for the stock market to take a hit. But I don't wish this collapse. I don't wish this collapse on anybody, Jim. If it gets really bad here and the stock market totally collapses, look, we've got a house of cards built on confidence, and it's a con game. And now the economy looks very, very shaky because of the supply chain breaking down, China's factories being closed down, and that is going to have an effect on the stock market. It's down again today, Friday, as we're having this conversation. Let me check what it's down, probably 700-800 points. How does this thing play out, do you think, in the next couple of months?
How much is it down today? How much is the Dow down?
I'm looking right now. It looks like it is.
Or is it closer to 1,000?
Down 560 points. We're having this conversation at 1:30 p.m. Central Time.
Okay, well, first of all, the emergency 50 basis point cut really didn't amount to much. It's very difficult, as other people have been saying repeatedly in the last few days. I'm amazed how often I'm hearing the same message. You can't fix an economic problem with printed money and monetary policy. With monetary policy properly done, you can wait 2 to 3 years and get a positive economic effect. But you don't fix a 10-year, a 9-year, an 8-year problem with QE and hypermonetary inflation to cover the debt and not discourage deficit spending. You don't fix it with a 50 basis point cut. You don't fix it with even 5 consecutive cuts during a year. You need several years to work this out. So what I'm seeing, what I'm expecting regarding the narrative, I don't like the word, but it sure means a lot. It's the buzz, it's the message given, it's the propaganda marquee title with lots of subheadings. I think what we're going to see is after all of these, say, 3 or 4 years of ridiculous stories about an expanding economy to justify the increase in rates. Remember in 2016 and 17, they were saying the economy is doing well. Therefore, we're going to increase the rates piece by piece, step by step, ratchet it up because we think the economy can handle it. Okay, that was a BS narrative of a strong economy. And now Trump got in and calls this a world envy. I don't think so. And then he calls us, the most robust economy we've seen in years. I don't think so. Why does shadow government statistics put out reports that, we're dealing with 8%, 7%, 9% inflation? The government comes out with 2 and 3%, which means that we're lying on the inflation-adjusted economy growth. We're lying by 5 and 6%. I make the point, Sean, that we've been stuck in a -2 to -4% economic recession for almost 10 years, maybe 12. So when we get this breakdown, which is inevitable, the empty shelves and the scramble for reviving and reconnecting and rerouting, I like that word, rerouting the supply chain, make it more domestic and make it more regional, I think what we're going to see is the blame given to the virus and the supply chain Chinese factor, when really it's going to be a reversion to the truth. And the truth is that we've been stuck in a recession for multiple years. So we're going to be moving down in the perception and gradually meet up with, or come close to meeting up with, the narrative of we got a really nasty recession underway. It's going to perhaps be worse than it ever has before since the 1930s. That's what I'm expecting. But you can split hairs on recession versus depression. I think the recession has lasted so long and has been so deep that since 2016, I've been calling it a depression. So when we started to tighten, I thought, my gosh, this is going to end so badly. It's going to ruin the Yellen, I don't want to call it legacy, but her chapter, the Janet Yellen chapter. And she was the only honorable one back 10 years ago before Lehman, the only one who spoke the truth. And now she wanted the job, she was part of the whole mess. She wanted the speaker fees and all that, glory. It's really quite sick, the money they make on the speaker tour. They just spout lies from the podium, make up stuff, revise history, get paid $250,000 and move on to the next podium. It's insane. Don't leave out the share buybacks from major corporations for lifting the stock market. And that's going to be removed because there's a lot of factors behind it. I think they got warned to stop doing that. And it was really a preliminary move to start the decline in the stock market. When people ask me how overpriced is the stock market, I say, well, if it comes down 75%, it might be near to proper pricing.
Well, I just want to remind people that it wasn't that long ago that the S&P, I think it was the S&P 500, you remember the bottom it hit in 2000, what was it, 8, 9, something like that?
I think it was 666. Yeah.
Look at the S&P 500
but
now,
that
folks.
that was just a random event. It could have been 679, but
yeah,
666.
Literally the intraday bottom.
Of that. Oh, don't make anything of that, Sean. That was purely random. Oh, bullshit. Okay,
the conspiracy theory
we
to have this
it,
conversation, Jim.
We see it all over the place. The numerology crap. This is exhausting because it's so scary. What my biggest concern right now regarding the virus, obviously don't want to see this all over the world, but my biggest concerns are two. The scattered nature of it all. Why is it showing up in Italy? Why isn't it showing up in Spain? Why not Spain? Why isn't it showing up all over the place in Eastern Europe? Why Italy? Well, how about if we bring into the equation that the Italians were very defiant against the central bankers in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years? Okay, if this is a rolling tide of contagion, it would hit one nation and the next and the next, like an overspilled dam and a flood. It's not happening that way.
Well, it is spreading globally, but you're right. It hit Italy particularly hard. And Iran, incidentally.
Well, yeah, okay. If you correlate it with enemies of the central bankers, you get a pretty tight number.
Yeah, what's one of the last countries on earth without a Rothschild central bank? ... Iran.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, there's Russia also. Russia is being defiant too. And I don't hear of cases in Russia. I hear, isolated one or two. I just read a very funny article before we began the recording, and it shows that in Canada they have 33 reported cases. In China, for some certain sector, they have 33 reported cases. For Italy, they have 33 reported cases. For another case, they have 33 reported cases. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Random number between 25 and 40. They're all 33. Yeah. That happens all the time.
And the S&P 500's bottom in 0809 was 666. No, I hear you. I hear you.
Okay. Here's my other fear. My other fear is that without proving anything, we've had other stories that test kits are hard to come by. I read a story of a woman, I think it was the United States, who wanted to be tested and had the grand rigmarole and finally gave up, couldn't get tested. She quit. She stopped. She said, I'm not doing it anymore. I've wasted hours and hours, deal with bureaucrats, dealt with hospitals. I can't get any testing. How on earth is any testing being done?
Let me read you this. This is very important. Let me read you this. This is extremely important. And this part of my fear about this thing in this country is the lack of precautions that have been taken by the U.S. government or by federal agencies. Let me just read you this. I've had this bookmarked forever. I meant to do a video on it, and I won't get to it, so here it is. My COVID-19 story, Brooklyn. Hello. This is over on Reddit. Just giving a heads up to what I and my doctor both considered a very fucked situation. I just spent a week in Japan, a country at high risk for COVID-19. I wore a mask and essentially tried to stay away from most touristy places, ... On arriving back to America 3 days ago, this was published 7 days ago, by the way. On arriving back to America 3 days ago, I developed a 102-degree fever, coughing and aches. I went to a local hospital in Brooklyn's ER. I informed them of my travel. They provided me a mask and redirected me to a private room and followed infection protocols, full face covers, gloves, aprons, etc. I had a chest x-ray and testing for flu, cold, pneumonia, and about 25 other viruses. They all came back negative. At this point, the hospital called the CDC requesting permission to perform the COVID-19 testing. The CDC denied the request on the ground that I did not have the most life-threatening symptoms, chest pain and shortness of breath. According to everything I read, it's very likely that I would not have these symptoms if you're in your 30s and relatively healthy. And that was that. They discharged me, said it was not coronavirus, and sent me home. So that's what I'm afraid of, Jim. This thing could be spreading all over the country. People don't even know they're sick. They don't even know they have it. They're going to clubs to work out every day like I do. I mean, many of us could be affected and not even know it for 14 to 24 days.
I know. And you're hearing that there's something like a 2 to 4 day incubation where you don't show symptoms before you actually appear sick and feel sick. So okay, my concern is that we're going to be pushed toward vaccination. And the integrity and proved efficacy, the proved, in other words, effective nature, the proved effective nature, the efficacy of vaccines is not there. Why did Gates announce that he had several million vaccines for coronavirus already? That told me that he knew something in advance. You got to think beyond the obvious here. Well, wow, that was really fortunate. It's kind of like the reaction that I heard from the mother-in-law of a friend of mine who was shown the picture of Hillary in 2016, the 73-year-old hag, and then the lively, vibrant, young-looking 50-something version at the CNN October, 2 months later, October debates on television for president. And the woman's reaction was, I thought she looked great. Okay, well, did she look like maybe the same woman, you moron? Okay, I'm concerned about forced vaccinations and emergency level vaccinations without proved effectiveness of what it is they're injecting and without even proving that there's a pandemic, because so far the numbers are way below standard influenza death levels, way below. So maybe we're seeing an outbreak of a nasty version of a flu. I don't mean to minimize this because some people are dying. I haven't heard of any white people dying, and I haven't heard of any Italians dying. But we hear a lot about cases, and they blame it on the C virus without really being certain. And let me just throw something as kind of a last comment. Why do they call it a coronavirus? Is it because the Queen of England might have funded the project? I'm just throwing that out because she does wear a crown, and corona is Spanish for crown. Might be Latin for crown too, I'm not sure. I know it's corona. If you're talking about a coin, a moneda in Spanish, you talk about the corona or the culo. The head, the crown is corona, and culo is the butt, the tail. Sometimes they call it the cola, the tail. I hear culo more than I hear cola. I kid some women, I say, well, that's a really pretty, I call it culo de caballo, you know, ponytail. What I said is you have a very nice butt of a horse. I mix intentionally culo and cola. It's just my little joke. I try to have some fun now and again because this is very serious stuff. Okay, what we're likely to see soon, Sean, is a declaration that the Treasury bond is a burning building and it's not a safe haven. I'm looking forward to that day, but there's going to be some, you know, personal consequences because let's just say family fortune is locked up in stocks and bonds. And my father just hit 100. My father's now 102 months of age. We joke, and I said, Dad, how are you managing? And he said, Jim, I'm actually doing pretty well, but you know, sometimes it takes a good 30 minutes for a bowel movement, and it takes a good 5 minutes to get out of a chair. And I say to him, well, Dad, I'd stick with just getting out of a chair. Don't worry about the bowel movement because that's too much time. And we laugh, and we have a good time. He said, I'm using my cane everywhere. I had to look up cane in Spanish. It's baston. Okay, so, you know, we're in dangerous times. I've been saying that in the last 3 years, there's been a lot of movement to the Treasury bonds as safe haven. It's been encouraged by the derivative activity managed by the Exchange Stabilization Fund, Department of Treasury, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Wall Street bankers. They encourage this impression, but they've got a problem now. You got too big a rally with the treasuries. They're going to become unstable. I'm expecting that we're not going to have a zip move down towards zero in the 10-year bond, 10-year treasury note. I call it the bond, so what? Treasury, 10-year treasury. I think what we're going to do is we're going to see a lot of fluctuation because people are going to get scared and say, this is not really a safe haven, and they get out. And they're finding gold more. So not only are we going to see some instability in the bond market, but when we do get down, say below 0.5%, below 40 basis points, you're going to see a global movement out of the U.S. Treasuries at the central bank level. I've been calling for this now for months in the hat-trick letter. I got details every single month on these points. And what they're going to do is they're going to dump the treasuries and move to gold and keep it quiet and talk about, you know, their accounting books, and it's all going to be a second book and a lie. I encourage people to go to golden-jackass.com. We're pretty much out of time here, Sean, but let me just mention that the website is golden-jackass.com, and I've got a subscribe button there. There's a lot of public articles and public interviews on there. There's a button for that, a button for subscribing. Bounce around for the free material. Check out the newsletter. Subscribe to the newsletter. This is the time now to be best informed. This is the time to get alternative information because the press is getting more ludicrous with its stories. I've also got a donate button, and I've got some recent hardship. I'm not talking about just the last 3 years. I'm talking about the last 3 months.
Jim, I know that you've been going through some hard times, and we're not going to get into the really super personal details. I know more than others. You've had some serious financial losses. You've been the victim of some bad people down there where you live. We don't necessarily have to even disclose where you live. A lot of people know, I know. But the point is that you've been victimized, and I want people to know that they can reach you directly at golden-jackass.com, where you also have a donate button. And I have a very generous audience. I hear from authors all the time that I have the most generous audience. I hope that people will go to golden-jackass.com and subscribe, or they could consult with you, or they could just donate directly, and I know that would mean a lot to you.
Yes, it would. I appreciate that. And the last time we were on, I had a very good response. I'm grateful for all that. I get a little emotional about this because this is a threat to me. It's a very visible and real, tangible threat to me, and it's affected a couple of people that I care about. So I hope you go to the website and sign up for the newsletter, hit the donate button, hit the consult button, help me out, and I hope to be around in the next several months.
Well, I hope so too, and I'll just let everybody know, I didn't forget what Jim said at the beginning of the interview. We left some fruit on the tree. You said something about the Rothschild cabal being stripped, flipped, or killed, and we've run out of time. We're not going to get into those details today, but maybe next time we can really peel that one back and talk further about it.
Okay, the White Dragons have been very busy to reduce their middle ranks. Very interesting concept.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And Jim, thank you. I know we were all over the map today, and sometimes these conversations can get a little hard to follow because we're trying to talk about so much. 1 hour does not give us enough time to crack these nuts, but I do appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on, Sean. It was great.
All right, Jim. All right, thank you. And guys, thank you so much. A shout out to my patrons who are keeping us in the fight for truth. For real news 24/7, guys, you can visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda and mockingbird mainstream media lies. God bless. Bye-bye.
So mostly it's like empty cans are coming in and there's nothing going out. So y'all better buy whatever y'all gonna buy because there's no telling how long this is gonna go on.